I thought about you yesterday. I take back everything I said about being in person, about COVID. I don't want to wish this on anyone. That's all I did was think about Councilman Clark and all the times he said to me.
No worries at all. You know, this is unfortunately we have to experience these type of things, and so then we get a greater perspective after we live it out. So, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Absolutely.
All right, I think that we can get started. Natalie, how are you doing?
Very good. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Good to see everyone. Yes.
Hi, Natalie. It's nice to see you.
Hi. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, Chief, good to see you. I think I Arco on. Yep, and Director Susan Webster, good to see you.
Good evening, sir.
All right. I think we're all here. I know Councilman Sanchez will be coming on later. He had a death in the family. All right, we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Quality Life and Public Safety Committee meeting. This meeting is now called to order for today, July 19th, 2022. We are streaming from Hartford Public Access TV, also streaming from channel 96 on Comcast and channel 6032 on Frontier. And we are joined, my name is Councilman TJ Clark. I'm the co-chair for the Public Safety and Quality of Life Committee, and I'm joined by Council President Mally Rosado, Councilman Josh Mitchum, who are voting members, and we are also joined by our representative from the Corporation Council, Attorney Natalie Fiola Guerreri, Harford Police Chief Jason Thody, our Director of Emergency Services and Technology, Director Susan Webster, our Chief of Fire, Chief Rodney Barco, Chief, I'm going to call him Chief and promoted him already, Sergeant Mastriani from from HPA-TV, Harford Public. It's been a long day. Harford Police Department. So we're going to move forward as with our agenda as it's been released, and so we're going to have a presentation by Director Webster from ESNT. Recording in progress. You may take it away.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone.
I'm sorry, Director Webster. I just want to clarify something really quick. So I'm going to have to log out and log back on. But I know that I see Sergeant Mastrani and Chief Thody, and I know that today on the agenda, and I apologize if I'm wrong. I've been under the weather for a couple of weeks, and Councilman Clark, thank you for covering everything that had to do with council for the past 3 weeks. But do we have Councilman Nick LeBron to address his resolution? Because if not, I know the last time Sergeant Mastrani was there for a long time, and then we didn't look at the resolution. So I just wanted clarification, Majority Leader, if he was going to be on, or are we going to postpone this resolution again?
I'm going to, it's on the agenda for us to discuss. So I'm leading with Director Webster so that I can give Councilman LeBron some time to get on.
Okay.
If not, then, you know, we can not have Sergeant Mastriani be on for the entire meeting again.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, you're welcome. Go ahead, Doctor. I'm promoting Dr. Webster. It's
Yes, Chief Mastriani and I are all set here with our promotions. Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. Reporting on 2 items today. One would be the computer-aided dispatch and records management project that we have been working on for quite some time now. Tomorrow will be the final completion of those 2 projects with the final data conversion of our evidence module. That's happening tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We're not going to have any disruptions to any of our services. And that will be the final piece of that project moving forward. So we're going to be signing off on that and thankfully done with that project. The second project that is just starting out is the the public safety and citywide radio infrastructure project. Happy to report that today we did have our vendor presentations with members of ES&T, Hartford Fire Department, Harford Police Department, as well as our procurement division overseeing the project. So we listened to 2 vendor presentations today. The committee has already submitted all of the information relative to the project. I do believe we have selected a vendor, but of course, because we're still under the RFP restraints, we can't really talk about who the selected vendor is, but we're very excited to be moving forward in that project. So if all things go well, we're hopeful to have a completion of that entire project December 2023. And that's all I have to report on, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. For the vendor, do you know how many RFPs that were submitted to the city?
We received 3 RFPs.
And do you know when the final decision is going to be made or that contract is going to be signed so that that information will be released to the rest of us?
It should be done within, we state the next couple of weeks. I'm cautiously optimistic that it will be done prior to that as we start contract negotiations with the selected vendor.
Okay. And just as far as another update, how have things been with the staff and making sure that you're fully operational from a staffing perspective?
So we continue to work on our staffing. Our trainees are all doing very well. We have 3 additional trainees that are going to be starting in August. We're trying to do some other things for our staff in order to assist with retention. So we're, again, cautiously optimistic, but things are going very well. We do have another testing that's going on this week, Saturday. Human Resources made that change from doing on a weekday to a Saturday to hopefully get some additional applicants that could come in and do the testing. So things are still on course.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions from my council colleagues? None? Okay, thank you, Director Webster.
My pleasure, thank you.
Right. Okay, I just got notification that Councilman LeBron will not be joining us. So Sergeant Mastriani, you can stay on if you want to, or you can go about the rest of your day. It's totally up to you.
Thank you. Chief, I don't know, do you want me for anything else? I don't mind staying. I enjoy it, actually.
That's a good thing to hear.
Yeah, I'm totally up to you, Chris. You know, I think we're just going to do the presentation, which it does have some of your stuff in there. So if you want to hang out, you can. If not, you can do as you please.
Okay, moving on, we have a presentation by Chief Barco from the Hartford Fire Department.
Unmute, there we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, good evening, Council, HPD, Natalie, Director Webster, although I think Councilman Clark called you Dr. Webster, but so my presentation for the quality of life hasn't changed much from having done too much different things from last month. But as far as fire safety education, health fair with the Southwest Boys and Girls Club, we did that in May. We continue to do CPR training for city employees as requested. Our special services division takes on that monumental task. We usually set up some dates and times when they're available and assist with teaching them CPR. Continuing the fire safety blitzes as fires occur. Again, the special services unit usually canvasses those neighborhoods and hands out fire safety material along with some minor inspections to see if residents need smoke detectors in their homes. As you know, the city does provide smoke detectors for city residents. The fire safety house education, those are the dates. We've been ramping up firehouse safety education during the month of June and July, and we continue to do so. We usually bring it to schools or neighborhood events, or sometimes whenever requested. I know there's a few community cleanups that'll be going on this month. Our Special Services Division will bring out the smoke trailer to kind of show those community children how to deal with fire safety incidents. So purchases, as we stated before, we have the 2 new district pickup trucks. Those are near completion. I believe they're waiting for some reflective graphics for the apparatus to be applied, and then we'll take delivery of those. Our frontline apparatuses, 2 engines and a ladder truck are still in production. We took receipt of a new UTV that's being outfitted down at our machine shop, and our APX 8000 radios were delivered, programmed, and we're just handing those out to the support divisions. We completed a field test of the Motorola radios. As you know, we continually test to see which is the best route for us to go. As you know, we're on the state system, but we're still passed into ES&T. So we continue to test on a monthly basis as incidents arise. We go out and test and offer resolutions as to why the incident occurred and what the resolution is. We continue to staff the special events along with HPD, like the Jazz Fest, the Food Truck Festival, the concerts at Xfinity. Those are picking up, and we continue to fire blitzing of the neighborhoods after a structure fire. These are some of the recent community partnerships we had. City of Hartford and 311 handed out home test kits during the Juneteenth. And then we did something at CCMC with Kids Safe Day. Our fire stat data for the month of June. As you can see, in the month of June, we had a slight declination in response time. We're at 66.7%. Typically, what happens, we try to remain in the 90th percentile, but our tour commanders in district usually investigate why the declination occurred. EMS response citywide, there's a slight increase from last month, but we're still working on the 90th percentile. Again, there could be 1 or 2 EMS calls with extended response time. Will just bring the average number down considerably. These are our incidents by hour for the month, incidents by day of the week. As you can see, Sundays we had average 286 calls, Mondays 365, Tuesdays 294, and Wednesdays appears to be our biggest days for calls for service for this year. We're averaging a high volume of calls on a Wednesday. Again, don't ask me why. There's really no rhyme or reason, but for some reason, Wednesday is the day to call the fire department. And I sent this PowerPoint presentation to council as well. EMS calls by NRZs. As you can see from the map, Northeast had 146 calls for service, Asylum Hill 140, and then Frog Hollow and Berry Square coming in 3rd place with 133 calls for service. EMS calls excluding vehicle accident with injury was 840, and medical assist was 442. So the first number, 321, is just your typical EMS call. 311 is generally when we get there, EMS is there, and they're already either servicing the patient or packaging the patient for transport. So we assist EMS, whether it be AMR or Aetna, in completing that process. Incidents by neighborhood, as you can see, for the month of June, the Northeast had 209, Asylum Hill 249, and Frog Hollow with 216 calls for service, whether it be EMS, rescue, fire, or hazardous materials. Rescue calls in the month of June, we had a total of 23 calls for service, Asylum Hill and downtown, with the highest volume of calls as it relates to rescues. And total number of 8 was the removal of people from stalled elevators. So you normally get those type of rescue calls, or it's either a lockout or a lock-in. All fires for the month of June, Northeast had the most calls for service as it pertains to building fires. They had 11, Asylum Hill, Frog Hollow, and South End coming in second and third. These are structure fires and location to the firehouses. Engine 10 had 2, Engine 8 had 2, Engine 15 had 2. So, and Northeast, they had 3. So it's pretty even across the board, but for last month, Northeast had the most calls for service as it pertains to structure fires. These are demographics for the Harford Fire Department. Currently, we're at 353 members out of 361. We have 184 residents, department members that live in Hartford. You can see the demographics: Black, Hispanic, white, and female. The total male to female ratio is a bit low, 5% female, 95% male. And then the officer count of the breakdown, officers total 107 out of 111 officers. 102 of those are males. 27 of those are Harford residents, 41 Hispanic, 44 white, and 21 Black. So the percentage-wise in ethnicity is pretty even. We're at 35% Hispanic, 33% Caucasian, and 31% African American. So pretty even across the board. We like to think we're the most even department in the city. And that's all I have for the presentation. If there's any questions, let me know. It's funny if that whole thing was on me.
No, it was not. It was not. Thank you for your presentation. Is there any indication as to why the cost for services were so high, especially in the Northeast and the other 2 neighborhoods, other 3 actually?
So, you know, it's for the Northeast. I think for this month we just had a bunch of structure fires. Not all of them were big. Some of them, a lot of them was like kitchen fires where someone left food on the stove that extended into the cabinet area, but it wasn't big enough for the residents not to occupy their house. So we just had, in terms of structure fires, we just had more small kitchen fires than anything, but it tends to jump from month to month. So, you know, we can see in July, it might be in the South End or it might be in the West End, but there's really no specific rhyme or reason as to why it occurs in one neighborhood more than the other.
Okay, thank you. Council President, I see your hand is up. You have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, Chief Barco. Thank you for that presentation. And this is something that I brought up before, but is it usually the norm that if a smoke alarm goes off, 2 or 3 ladders go to that location because of a smoke alarm?
It depends on the circumstances, ma'am. So if your neighbor smoke alarm is going off and you know they are home, then we're going to send a full assignment. We're going to typically send 3 engines, 2 trucks, a district, a heavy rescue. And that's being cautious because, you know, it's rare that the smoke alarm is going off for no reason unless it's very old and it's malfunctioning. But typically it's going off for a reason. So we have to be prepared to mitigate if there is actually an incident. We see it more times than not where people forget to turn the burner off all the way, and they leave the house to go to the store or to a friend's house, and you know, that little bit of heat starts to evaporate what's ever in the pot, and then the pot stops burning and gets hot enough to extend to the cabinet. So, but if you're a resident and your smoke detector is going off, and you see that there's no fire, but you just need assistance, we won't. As long as that's explained to the dispatcher, we won't send the full assignment.
Okay, and then my second question is, where are we with training our firefighters or hiring paramedics?
So paramedics is a really long way off, and it's very expensive. I think the wise choice would be a move to EMT. I don't, and I believe this was presented a couple of years ago when Chief Freeman was here. I don't believe there's actually a lot of recouping funding and transport, but I do believe that the city can offer a higher level of care to its residents, and that would be bumping up to EMT.
Absolutely. I've been hearing about this since I got on council in 2018, and I think that the city could use their resources better, you know, giving our firefighters that training. Right now, if a firefighter sent out and someone needs an EpiPen, they can't take that EpiPen and actually apply it to, you know, to the person. The person's got to do it on its own, or they have to wait for an ambulance to get there. So is this something that you're going to address sooner rather than later, or is that still in conversation?
Yes, ma'am. I'm happy to sit down and review the three methods of delivery that we've talked about over the previous years. Is I would assume the problem will be in funding, and it is a bit of a long process as well. But
Okay.
that would be the starting point, would be funding the program.
Thank you, Chief. I'm all set, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Council President. Any other questions for Chief Barco? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Chief.
All right, so
Appreciate your
thank
work.
you. And as I said, I emailed the PowerPoint to City Council.
Thank you very much for that. Up next is our presentation from the Hartford Police Department by Chief Jason Doty.
Thanks, everybody. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. 1 second. I think I would have this down pat by now. Share screen, here we go.
It's okay. It happens to the best of us. There we go.
Here we go, you got it?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see it's in presentation mode. There we go. All right. As I said last time, we're still working on kind of redeveloping the CommStat package. So some things are going to work a little or look a little bit different. The traditional year-over-year comparison CommStat package is still kind of a work in progress. We had to convert the first 5 months of last year from an old method of reporting crime to the FBI to a new method, which has been very labor intensive. And that conversion is not completed yet. So for the CommStat package to show a traditional year-over-year comparison, that's probably not going to happen until next month. We might have a CommStat package next week. If we do, I will email it out to council those so they can kind of look at a year-over-year look. I do have some, with the help of Sergeant Mastriani and our researcher. We do have some dashboard screenshots that they've shared with us on homicides and non-fatal shootings, and some trend information on violence that I'll show today. So this is our homicide and non-fatal shootings year to date. As you can see, we're at 22 homicides, 77 non-fatal shootings. It breaks them down by month in the next column down, and by incident circumstance in the next column below that. As you can see, a third, 33.3 of our incident circumstances arise from personal disputes. We've talked about that a lot lately. 14.8% are unknown, 12.3% self-inflicted, 8.6 shared between group dispute, and another 8.6 drug related. So those are categories that are down significantly from the past. Drug related incidents was our leader previously. So as you can see, we're seeing a shift in that, and this is just how closely that we monitor that data and how much we pay attention to where it happens and why it happens. Domestic is at 3.7, and then robbery at 2.5 is the lowest number. Drug robbery at 4.9. So these are all of our non-fatal shootings and homicides year to date. This is our trending data. It goes month to month. So the end of July will be entered in as soon as July ends. But as we can see, when it comes to cumulative homicide and shootings in 2020 and in 2022, we are dead even as of June. We are down from 2021 and up from 2019, but the pandemic violent crime increases that we saw were really 2019 and 2020. So we have lowered those numbers to match at least 2020, and we are below 2021. So that is a good sign. Homicides by themselves, we are down from 2021, but we are up from 2020 and 2019, as you can see on the bottom. And that is a month over month look at our yearly homicide and non-fatal shooting data. Homicide arrests in 2022, we've made 10 so far this year with 3 active arrest warrants as well. We just made one yesterday. That was the second arrest in the 271 Franklin Avenue homicide. So this arrest was made on Monday, the 18th. Arrested 20-year-old Christian Feliciano. He was, in the homicide of Christian Feliciano, he was killed back in February of 2022 at 271 Franklin. The Fugitive Task Force and the U.S. Marshal's Office apprehended 23-year-old Leonard Lavoie of Hartford yesterday morning. He was transported to headquarters here, where he was charged with murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and criminal possession of a firearm. He's being held on $1 million bond. And remember, this is the second arrest in that homicide. The first one was Juan Perez, 2/18/96. He was arrested previously on the same homicide. So that was a good clearance. I believe those are the only 2 arrests that we anticipate in that case. Gun seizures, we talk about this quite a bit. Total so far this year, this is Sergeant Mastriani's kind of wheelhouse. That's why I said if you wanted to stay on, we keep him on. He can make a comment or two about it if you'd like. But total arrests so far this year, 212. That's last year's entire arrests were 341, and 2020's entire year arrests were 252. So at this pace, we will probably seize well in excess of 400 guns for the year. There's an asterisk next to the ghost guns because that's the most concerning. In all of 2020, we seized 7 total ghost guns. So far this year, we've seized 34, which is up from 29 in all of last year. These ghost guns are a real problem. As we hear legislators and lawmakers talk about cracking down on those, that's very important. I think that we treat those differently. They're not traceable. They're not regulated. Many times we find they're fully automatic, or they have very high capacity magazines, and they're the guns that we really just don't want out there for sure. Not that we want any of them out there, but those are particularly concerning. This is just a visual of some of the guns that we've recovered in the last few weeks. Chris, you got anything that you want to add to this? Since I know you're, this is your bread and butter.
I think a good note is that, last year was 341 was the highest since I have them tracked back to 15 years. And then last year at this time, we were at 176 seized firearms, we're already 36 ahead of last year, which was like a record high.
Yeah, the officers are doing a good job. I mean, it's the ghost guns are really concerning. The number of guns out there are really concerning. You have the, I honestly didn't bring it up for this presentation. Do you have the number of shots fired? I think there's a couple of these trends that we look at, and keep our eye on, and there's a couple that are trending in the right direction. Number one, the number of non-fatal shooting victims is down. The number of non-fatal shooting arrests are up. The number of shots fired that ShotSpotter picks up in the city is also down. Chris, if you got those numbers.
I'll get it in 1 second, Chief.
That's okay. So those are some of the things that, as we worry about, gun violence and safety in the city, those are some of the things that we kind of track closely, and they are generally trending in the right direction. As we know, our violence analysis really kind of pointed us towards narcotics being especially last year, being a large driver of our violent crime. So we've really put an emphasis on that here. And here you can see year to date in 2022, we have recovered 60,000 bags of fentanyl. We only recovered 40,000 bags in 2021 and only 16,000 bags in 2020. Now, I think some of that is the availability of fentanyl and how much that is really become an influx of that in our community and across the whole country. But two, the work that Vice Intelligence and Narcotics is doing in cracking down on that. In grams, we're just about even to where we finished the year last year, 7,300 grams versus 7,300 grams, essentially, as we concluded 2021. And we have, another six months and change to go on the year. Crack is about steady between this year and last year, although we will probably end up seizing more, than we did last year. Cocaine is up significantly. That's odd a little bit, given the fentanyl numbers. It's not necessarily the drug that we see as our drug of choice here in the city and what we see in most of our enforcement. And then money seized, a lot of that takes a little while to come in. So it's showing $486,000 seized in these drug offenses and these drug search warrants versus 2.1 million in 2021 and almost 4 million in 2020. Search warrants executed, we're at 43 so far, just short of halfway through the year. They were at 59 total for last year and only 26 total for 2020. So, this is the productivity that we're really pushing here to try to impact those violent crime numbers. The challenging ones are these personal disputes. We do have Chris and C4 that monitor these exchanges on social media and in other places where we may be able to roll out Peace Builders or somebody that Project Longevity or anybody that might be able to interrupt these. But personal disputes are tough ones. A lot of these homicides have occurred indoors in apartments, and we just unfortunately cannot be there. So it becomes an effort to bring people to justice at that point versus our primary effort, which is prevention. Auto theft, obviously huge problem last year. Our regional auto theft task force has done a good job so far. Year to date this year, we've made 74 occupied stolen motor vehicle arrests. Last year total, we had 112. So those numbers are still trending about where they were last year. Those folks are doing great work, and that's a great regional effort. We get a lot of accolades from surrounding towns and from folks here. As we know, those stolen cars are the ones that do tend to drive around the city in a reckless way and cause a lot of, they lead to our shootings. Those are the vehicles that are used in our shootings a lot of times because they're stolen and they can't be traced. They are not often driven within the laws, speeding laws and red lights and stop signs. So we still have a significant effort on those stolen cars. I believe that is the presentation that we have.
I have the shots fired if you want.
Good, good.
So that we're down 221 shots fired incidents this time last year compared to last year. So about 19% down on shots fired incidents, which I know a lot of people have felt because I've had people actually call me asking me if ShotSpotter was working because it had been so quiet at times. But 221 incidents in 6 months, 7 months is pretty significant.
Yeah, for the first time in about 2 years, I think we had a couple months that were in the green or at least in the yellow when it came to the shots fired, which is a year-over-year comparison that goes back to well before we saw the increase, in the gun violence. So those are numbers that we'd like to see trending in that direction, and we hope that continues, especially since we're almost all the way through July, and this is one of the months that we see that number increase, and it's leveled off and actually decreased from last year. So good signs.
How's the, thank you for the presentation. How's the OT budget going, especially with the amount of special events that we're seeing in the city? How's the manpower?
Well, manpower is different than OT budget. The manpower is down, so the OT budget's up. When it comes to special events, a lot of those are reimbursable. So, that is a good thing. Some of these extra details and things like that, not so much. So it's doing okay. We have about 12 officers that we have coming off of field training in the next few weeks that will help, bolster some of the relief list numbers in patrol. We've changed a little bit of the way we do the scheduling to try to reduce the number of order-ins. Just to give you some idea, I just had an analysis done. Give me 1 second here. This is a pretty interesting stat. We had, ever since we changed, I changed the policy on how we fill, on how we do order-ins last year. We changed the policy at the end of June, beginning of July. It was one of the driving factors for my illustrious vote of no confidence. But I think the policy change was important and it was the right thing to do. So we have, last year through the end of June, through June 28th, we had filled 5,500 overtime vacancies just in the patrol division, just in the first 5 full months of the year. And that required 658 order-ins. This year, we filled 7,100 shifts with only 268 order-ins. You hate the cliche, do more with less, but last year we had 150 officers in patrol. This year we have 128. So I think that policy is making it a lot more fair. It's encouraging people to work when they can, so they don't get ordered in when they don't want to. And I've heard a lot of positive feedback about it. We've kind of had it in place now long enough for us to look at its impacts, and it's doing the right thing. And we're going to look at other ways, to try to make those processes work a little bit better, a little fairer across the board, especially for the younger officers, to try to keep, that retention here. I knock on wood here, but the number of people leaving has decreased, and we haven't had anyone leave in quite a little while here now. So, I think some of the changes that we're making, I think, as the officers are feeling, I think they're feeling more appreciated, in what they're doing out there. I think there's been a little bit of a pendulum shift in the way they feel about how they do their job. And I think all that's good for us. So we'll keep an eye on it.
Also too, regarding the OT budget, how's the trend? Are you trending still in a positive rate, or are you already dipping into your reserves for the new fiscal year?
Not dipping in the reserves for the new fiscal year, but I would say that we're on pace. We did increase the overtime budget a little bit because of what we saw last year. It's kind of early. It's kind of early to tell, but I think on the positive side, there's a lot more special events, right? The Domingo events are, they cost us money. When we have some of these larger events, that we have to put cops out there for, they do cost us money. So we will see the special events side of it increase. Some of that's reimbursable, some of it's not. As far as just the basic coverage, I think it's status quo. It'll get better as we get more regular officers that are filling those shifts that are not on overtime. So we've got these 12 coming off of field training. We have another class starting in August. We're not exactly sure how many officers are going to be in that class, but I say with a little bit of hesitation that it looks as though it'll be one of our largest classes in probably the last 4 years. And as of right now, it looks like a very diverse class too. So if I can get more people and more diversity, then that's a win. So again, we have a full-time recruitment division. I give them a lot of credit. Our folks in backgrounds are pushing these folks through to try to get them hired before some other department steals them. Team effort, but I would stay status quo as far as the overtime goes.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from my colleagues? Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Councilman Clark. Thank you, Chief Doty, for the presentation. A few questions. First, this is just based on my own impression and hearing from constituents. I get the sense that the late night, very loud, ongoing fireworks this summer, as we move away from July 4th, are not nearly as bad as they were last year or the year before. I mean, that's just my impression, like what people tell me, and also like in my own neighborhood. And I just wonder if you've seen that go down, or if that's just, I'm just lucky.
No, I totally agree with you. We were, I hate to say it, but we were holding our breath a little bit, this year going into the beginning of July. But remember, last year was so bad that we actually saw it in like March. It was really early. I've heard a lot of theories on that. I know Chris chuckled a little bit, but I mean, some people said that people use, like some of the COVID money to go buy fireworks. That was a real thing that we were hearing from people that we were arresting for it. I don't know about that. I mean, maybe it's just, I think honestly that a lot of those weird uptick problems we had, are we having, pop-up parties? Yeah, but nothing like we saw last year. And that's where we were able to mitigate some of those extra details that we had, in the past that we didn't have to do this year. Remember last year for a period of time, I had like 2 officers in every corner of the city, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, just responding to firework calls that were coming in on a special text line that we set up through Sue Webster's crew to deal with fireworks. We did not see that this year. So I agree with you. I don't think that is nearly the problem that we had. You still hear it. I still hear it sometimes when I'm walking around Cole Park and stuff, but nothing like it was last year.
All right, thank you. So another unrelated question about well, I guess generally about special events, but particularly about Domingo. I was at the first one on Farmington, and I observed, and I also heard from a lot of folks afterwards that it seems like there was just an awful lot of cops there doing not much, in the sense that like at every intersection it seemed had like several cruisers and several officers, and there were groups of maybe 5 or 6 officers sort of along the way just talking amongst themselves. I heard from one constituent that there was a kid who was operating a large remote control car and kept crashing into people, and no one could get that kid to stop, a little kid. And that they went to the officers, and the officers said, who were nearest, and the officers said, well, that's not our job. And at the same time, I know I was by the 224, and people were trying to come out onto Farmington, which was of course closed, but they didn't have another way out. And it ended up just being random people who directed traffic, because I saw folks go off and try to get officers to come and help see them through, and the officers, for whatever reason, I couldn't hear the conversation, weren't coming. And now I know that with the next Domingo on Park Street, that the hope had been to go all the way down to Main Street, and that got scaled back, as I understand it, partly because of the cost of staffing all of those intersections that were closed. And I guess my question is, why so many cops?
So there's a couple reasons for it. Number one, we've never done anything like that before. So no one really knew what to expect. When you're talking about putting large numbers or at the anticipated large numbers of people in an otherwise busy street that you're closing down, you have to err on the side of the caution, or at least I am going to err on the side of caution. So we sat down and very deliberately went through intersection by intersection. We actually covered that same stretch of road with almost half the number of officers that we would cover that stretch of road with for the marathon. We used DPW trucks. We tried to think outside of the box about ways to close some of the streets where you don't use a police officer, but places where they wanted to be able to cross traffic, you needed 2 officers there. So we staffed it actually as light as we were comfortable staffing it, not knowing really what to expect. We had a debriefing after that, and we had another meeting for the next one that's coming up on Park Street, closing Park Street and having north to south traffic continue and be pulled through areas like Broad and places like that is going to be a little bit more challenging. But the officers are there to cross traffic. We didn't have officers at every intersection because that was how we planned it. We thought some of the smaller intersections we could use barriers, and DPW trucks and things like that, where you wouldn't have to overstaff it with officers. So quite to the contrary, we actually tried to reduce the number of cops out there, just because, like I said, with staffing, it's difficult to get that many people to work extra duty on the weekends. And I don't want to have to order in, because that results in people unhappy with their work conditions and they look to go somewhere else where they will likely get ordered in. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. As far as the Park Street one goes, one of the activity hubs was moved by the event, not by us, from Main and Park further west, I think over by Pope Park. So that hub being moved, we had always expressed concerns, as I think did the fire department, about closing off Washington Street and Hudson and access to the hospital from the highway. Hudson Street is a main thoroughfare. If anybody frequents that area, that's how most of your ambulance get off the highway and go to the hospital. That always concerned me about having that closed. We were going to overstaff that intersection so we could pull ambulance through if we needed to. But that area was a concern. Now, when they moved the hub, it had nothing to do with overtime. If we were going to make this Domingo a success, I never mentioned overtime. My concern is being able to staff all those intersections appropriately so you don't get cars on the route. That's why you have motorcycles that are generally on the route, because cars can squeak onto the route. They did. They came out of private driveways. They came out of businesses. You can't cover every entrance and exit onto Farmington Avenue or Park Street. So we have to have bicycles and motorcycles able to respond to these cars quickly and pull them off the route, get them where they need to go, knowing that people still have to get around the city. So scaling that thing back to Washington Street gave us 2 additional north to south thoroughfares, Washington Street and Hudson, and opened up the main routes to the hospital. With that hub no longer being over there, it really was something that we discussed at the meeting and no one had a problem with at the meeting. I have heard from a couple businesses there. I have offered to try to see if I can negotiate, maybe a tent or a display or something that's inside. And it's not their physical business. I know it's not ideal, but something that's inside the closed off area. Glad to work with people. I've responded to, those emails that have come to me. I'm just waiting to hear back from some folks on it. But, remember that we've never had anything like Domingo where we've shut off huge sections of main thoroughfares of the city for extended periods of time just for people to hang out on the road. Marathon, we're able to open and close sections at a time. Some sections do stay closed for a significant period of time, but that's the closest thing we've ever had to Domingo. So we will adjust staffing as we move forward, but not knowing what to expect, we staffed it the way we did.
So to follow up on that, and I appreciate the thoroughness of that answer, the groups of officers that folks and myself saw on Farmington who were just hanging out, like 5-6 officers just hanging out for long stretches of time, like not even at intersections. Like I remember by the a block east of the Twain House where there's a little strip mall with the African food market. There was just a bunch of officers there on the parking lot, just like hanging out in the shade. And there was a couple other spots with like big groups of officers who weren't directing traffic, who weren't doing anything, and we're just hanging out. And why?
Yeah, so I don't know specifically what they were doing, but I can tell you that you had officers that were on traffic posts to close the street off for traffic safety. And then you also had officers, you had community service officers that oftentimes were out there on their regular or whatever to engage with the people that are out there. And then there are response officers for, if there's an issue, if a car pops off, and sometimes they station them along the route in small groups so that they can be responsive. I don't know specifically what those specific officers were doing, but generally in a event like that, I mean, I go to the Xfinity too, and sometimes I see, officers that are standing there, they're there in case something happens. I can't answer specifically to the ones that you saw, but not everyone has an assignment at every moment. Some of them are just there for visibility. Some of them are there to respond in case a car gets on the route, in case something happens. We unfortunately have seen tragic things happen, across the country in events like this, where a car gets on the route, sometimes by accident, sometimes with malicious intent. And if we're not there to respond quickly, that just makes that worse. So, some of that is just officers to be there in case something occurs.
Did any arrests arise out of the?
I don't think any did. No, I don't think we had any arrests. I did hear about the remote control car issue. And I think, the issue there is that and I had this discussion, and that's a policy decision. I think that the event staff and even potentially the mayor's office has to kind of decide on, we closed the street to vehicular traffic for an open event. I think that the officers didn't necessarily know what criminal act that would constitute to tell someone to not go out there. Now, I heard that the way it was expressed to me was that they just didn't want the car on the route. I didn't hear that there was any complaint that the car had hit somebody. If that's the case, then now you have something that you can talk to somebody about. But if the car is just on the route and the person from the event that came and talked to me about it told me they just didn't want the car on the route, and I said, it's kind of splitting hairs, right?
Well, I had heard that the car hit somebody, so that is a different.
Yeah, and if that's the case, that's a different story. But if we're just saying, hey, you can't have the car on there, well, that's a tough one.
Last question on Domingo. I know you said you need the motorcycles to respond, in sort of a lighter way than with a cruiser within that space. But there were a couple occasions when I heard about this from a number of people where the motorcycles moved in a column at a pretty good clip through the closed street. And it seems like if the whole point is not to have motor vehicles on the street and they're not responding to anything, maybe that's unnecessary. Maybe that's a thing you could change in terms of policy for the next ones.
Yeah, so that came up in the meeting. They talked to me about that too. And I talked to the supervisors that were out there. Generally speaking, that's what we use the motors for, to try to be a little bit safer, although they are louder in some cases. They are more nimble, and we can get them through, pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic a lot easier to respond to events. Those were the traffic division folks, and their kind of job was to go down the route and make sure that there were either officers or barricades at every intersection. And the route is the way to do that. We do it during the marathon too. I appreciate people, saying, hey, there's not supposed to be any vehicles out there. Emergency vehicles are an exception. I did instruct my staff for the future one, if you don't have to be on the route, then don't be on the route. I don't think that they necessarily want to be out there with cars, because you always have to look all around because there's a couple of vehicles out there too. We always have a lead car that goes out there, the lieutenant that's inspecting to make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. They have the build sheet of where everyone's supposed to be. I don't have a problem with that, but they generally just shouldn't be driving back and forth. I don't think that they were in this case, but I did make that clear for the next one. If we have the ability to drive off the route, we'll drive off the route. But, for both fire, and actually the fire department chimed in, in the meeting as well, and said that they have vehicles on the route for the same reasons: medical response, making sure that they're delivering water in some cases. They do have the little gators, which are technically motor vehicles that they drive around in. There are legitimate reasons for emergency vehicles to be on the route, and I think people have to understand that there's an exception. That they're an exception on purpose. They're generally trained to try to do that in a safer way. Knock on wood, we've had very good luck with all the events that we've had in streets here to not have any issues with that. But I did instruct them, if they don't have to be on the route, not to be on the route.
If you have bicycle cops, it seems what you need to do is check that every intersection is manned. It seems like for this, God gave us bicycle cops rather than sending like 5 motorcycles through, in a column.
The bicycle cops can't get there nearly as quick, and the bicycle cops are your CSOs that are actually there to respond in case there's a breach of peace, or they were riding up with kids, and I saw a million pictures of them with kids and stuff. The CSOs are the ones on the bicycles. The traffic division guys are the ones responsible for traffic, and they're the ones that are on the bikes, on the motors.
All right, I got nothing else. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilman. Want to acknowledge Councilman Sanchez for coming in. I'm not sure if you have any questions, Councilman.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. No other questions for Chief Thody. We thank Chief for your presentation, as always, and please continue to keep up the good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, moving on. Next item on our agenda is a resolution introduced by Councilman Nick LeBron regarding facial recognition technology, which was item 6 on the June 13th, 2022 agenda. Since he is not here, the chair will entertain a motion to postpone.
So moved.
Second.
Then properly moved by Councilman Sanchez and seconded by Council President Rosado to postpone this item. Any discussions? Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor of postponing this item indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. This item is postponed. Since we have no other business to discuss for this Quality Life and Public Safety Committee today, this committee meeting is now adjourned. So thank you very much and have a good night. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.